At least 150 wildfires have been raging across Quebec, Canada. And smoke from those fires have created a thick haze along the East Coast. On the Nowman Show, I spoke to Earth Scientist Erika Podest from NASA in Pasadena about the loss of biodiversity and the destruction of our physical environment. On the Jordan Peterson podcast, environmental attorney and activist and presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. also addressed the climate crisis based on his decades-long research with some interesting insights and solutions.
We believe, or scientists believe, that Earth is undergoing its sixth mass extinction. So what does that mean? That means that we are losing biodiversity, we're losing flora and fauna at a rate that has not been seen since the dinosaurs were wiped out of this Earth.
Oh, wow.
66 million years ago. Yes, so that is the accelerated loss of biodiversity that's currently going on in our planet. And the main reason for that loss of biodiversity is because of human activities. We are destroying habitats, both on land and in the ocean. In the ocean, we're overfishing, we're destroying corals. On land, forests are being cut for grazing, for agriculture, and biodiversity is being lost at a quicker rate than we can even document it.
Wow. Let alone replenish.
Correct.
Restore.
Correct. So there's been some dire warnings from international agencies about needing to do something very quickly in order to slow down this massive loss of biodiversity.
I believe that carbon in the atmosphere and methane does increase warming. Why do I believe that? I believe it because it makes sense, one, and I believe it because I read reports. I've been involved in probably more 500 to 700 cases, and almost all of them have some kind of scientific controversy. And so I wouldn't be good at my job if I couldn't read science critically. And all of my cases involve intense critical reading of science and cross-examination of scientists. And you have to have pretty much complete domain knowledge to be able to do that. And if you're going to win cases. So I'm used to doing that. There's tens of thousands of studies. Most of them say yes. Virtually all of them say yes. Not all of them, but virtually all of them say that carbon is contributing to the warming. If you ask me, if your position is the warming's not happening, then that's like somebody saying the autism epidemic is not happening. You look around, you can see it everywhere. The ice caps are melting, et cetera, the Greenland ice sheet. I spend a lot of time outdoors, and I see over 69 years, I've seen the changes, and I've seen them, the mass migration of animals, of southern animals like black vultures and stuff, that, the northern increase in their ranges. I've seen the way that I've kept track since I was a kid about when the leaves turn. So, and it steadily moved up each year. And so I see that all of my senses are telling me that, the warming is occurring. Now, why is the warming occurring? There's people out there who say the warming's not occurring. There's other people who say, yeah, the warming's occurring. But it's not from carbon. The memos that I have read from the 1970s from Exxon scientists to Exxon management. Exxon during that time had what it bragged were the best scientists in the world who knew more about the fate of the carbon molecule in the atmosphere, in the environment, in every circumstance than any other scientist. And in the 70s, they were telling their management at Exxon, if we keep burning oil at this rate, we're going to warm the globe. It's high school math to them. And they said, it will be a good thing for the company. It will be a bad thing for humanity and for the wildlife and the planet. But it will be a good thing for the company because we're going to melt the Arctic. And there's a lot of oil under the Arctic, and we should be get ready to exploit it because it is going to be melted if we continue doing this. So, my feeling is if those were the top scientists in the world, they had no interest in lying about it. And this is what they were, saying. So I think it's probably more likely to be true than false. This crisis is being used as a pretext for clamping down totalitarian controls the same way that the COVID crisis was. And it's the same people. It's intelligence agencies. It's the World Economic Forum. It's the Billionaires Boys Club at Davos. And it's the same kind of cabal of people who will use every crisis to stratify society toward greater power for the super rich and greater power for the military, greater power for the intelligence apparatus, and less power for everybody else. And so my approach to this, Jordan, is that I have a personal belief that the climate crisis is real. I do not insist that anybody else share my belief, and I feel like Lundgren is correct in saying that the climate orthodoxy gets it wrong. That the carbon orthodoxy, the people who ascribe to that get it wrong. There are actually a lot more important things than carbon. That is, than carbon sequestration and geoengineering. There's habitat preservation, the most important thing we can do. We've forgotten completely about that because of the obsession with reducing carbon. There's regenerative agriculture, which is absolutely critical, including for carbon sequestration, but also that we have good foods, that we preserve the soil, and all of these other impacts from a warming climate, which are, the shrinkage of lakes and agriculture, the destruction of soils and ecosystems, the preservation of fisheries, and all of these, which are all tied into climate, and the preservation of whales, for example, which in subtle ways also, but very, very certain, but almost unmeasurable ways, are part of the overall attack on the living planet, which is really the way that we need to look at this. And there's not just a war on carbon is not going to solve the problem if we don't have a habitat left at the end. So when I talk about these issues, I rarely talk about climate. I think we need to get rid of coal and oil, but I don't say we need to do that to save the climate because it's not convincing. And even if you say, tens of thousands of scientists agree with me, people today have a good reason to not believe scientific orthodoxies or pronouncements, right? We went through that in COVID where we were told, the science, the established science that said this is all real. And there's a lot of people who are saying, yeah, but it wasn't real and it isn't real. And showing somebody a graph and saying this is what's going to happen to you if you don't behave is not a good way to get good behavior. Right? And it's going to happen to you in a long way. But the thing is that both Republicans and Democrats, I found in 40 years, love the environment. They want to keep sacred places. They want to have healthy food. They don't want toxics for their children. They don't want to see 22-story machines cutting down the Appalachian Mountains. And, the 500 biggest peaks have been cut to the ground. An area of the Appalachians the size of Delaware has been leveled. These are our Purple Mountains, Majesty, where Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett roamed. And, we are industrializing these landscapes so nothing will ever grow on them again. 2,200 miles of rivers has been filled. We have poisoned every freshwater fish in North America from discharges of mercury from coal-burning power plants. Nobody wants that. The high peaks of the Appalachians, the forest cover is gone from Georgia to northern Quebec because of acid rain. All of those high altitude lakes are now sterile. Nobody wants that. My approach to climate, my approach to reducing, to energy, let's say my approach to energy, is using free markets and not top-down control. So what I would do is I would end subsidies and then I would let marketplace determine. And what's going to happen is renewable energies is going to triumph because, You can build a solar plant for $1 billion a gigawatt today. A wind plant costs about $1.2 billion. A coal plant costs $3.6 billion. And then dual cycle gas turbines cost probably a couple billion a gigawatt. But once you build a wind or solar, it's free energy forever. So it's always going to be cheaper. The problem with renewable energies like that is we do not have a transportation system to get them to market. So we need a marketplace. We need a grid system that can allow every individual in our country to become an energy entrepreneur, produce rooftop solar, sell it back to the grid at the same price that the utilities are getting, have every farmer in North Dakota be able to put wind turbines on their cornfields. They all want to do it. A cornfield in North Dakota is worth $800. A cornfield with a wind turbine on it's worth $3,200. Every farmer in North Dakota wants to put a wind turbine on their property. The problem is they cannot get those electrons to the markets in Cleveland, Cincinnati, St. Louis, New York, because we do not have an efficient grid system, and we need to build that the same as Eisenhower did with the highway system when I was a kid. We need to build a grid system that will create a marketplace, and once we have that marketplace, we'll have free energy forever. Just like when we built the ARPANET grid, for information, the cost of information went to zero. We built the telecom grid, the cost of phone calls went to zero. When we build an energy grid, the cost of electrons will go to zero, and that will be a huge economic boom for our country, and nobody's going to be using oil and coal anymore.